All right, so in the last part of this lesson, we are going to be writing equations from the answers. So essentially what we're doing is we are taking this information here that we already learned, and we're working backwards. So we're starting with the answers, we're going to put it back into factored form, multiply it all together to get our equation. And we're using these pieces of information to assume answers that aren't necessarily given to us. All right, so to look at problem 4, so we don't have any imaginary or irrational answers. Okay, so looking at this, we're just going to put them back into factored form. So to start with, we're going to take each answer and set it equal to x. So we would have x equals 3, x equals 2, and x equals -1. And then we're going to move them back to be on the same side. So I'm going to subtract the 3, and then I'm going to put it into factored form at the same time. So we'll have x minus 3, and then in this one, again, we're subtracting, so x minus 2, and then here we're adding, so x plus 1. So now if we multiply, we always multiply in sets of 2. So I'm going to ignore the last one, and then we're going to FOIL this together. So that will give us x squared, and then we will have a negative 2x, and then plus a negative 3x, so that'll be negative 5x. And then negative 3 times negative 2 is positive 6. And then we're going to take that answer times the one that we haven't used yet, so that x plus 1. So again, we're just taking x squared times x, so that will give us x cubed. X squared times 1 is x squared. Negative 5x times x is negative 5x squared. Negative 5x times 1 is negative 5x. And then we go to the next one. 6 times x is 6x. 6 times 1 is 6. And then we are going to combine like terms. So we will have x cubed, and then x squared minus 5x squared will be a negative 4x squared. And then negative 5x plus x will be a positive 1x. And then a plus 6. So this is our answer in standard form. All right, so next one is going to be the same idea. So but this time we have an imaginary answer. So that means that we are also going to assume that negative 3i is an answer, even though that they don't give that to us. And then we're going to start the exact same way. So we're going to have, so I'm going to start with this one. So x equals 2, and then x equals 3i, and x equals negative 3i. And then we move everything to be on the same side of our equal sign, in the factored form. So we're subtracting the 2, so x minus 2. Subtracting the 3i, so x minus 3i. And then we are adding the 3i. And then again, we're just going to multiply. Now remember, when we multiply, we have to do it in sets of 2. And because we have an imaginary number this time, we're going to start with the last 2 to multiply. And then we're going to take that answer times the 1 in front. Okay. So again, I'm just going to rewrite this one. So we're going to have an x minus 2. And then we're going to FOIL this. So x times x will be x squared. X times 3i is going to be a positive 3ix. And then negative 3i times x will be negative 3ix. Negative 3i times positive 3i will be negative 9i squared. So now before we multiply the next group together, we need to simplify. So the middle terms are actually going to cancel out. And then we have to remember that I squared represents a negative 1. So if I substitute negative 1 in, this means negative 9 times negative 1, which is going to change it to be a positive 9. So we're really taking x minus 2 times x squared plus 9. So now we're just going to FOIL this together. So x times x squared is going to be x cubed. And then x times 9 is a positive 9x. And then negative 2 times x squared is a minus 2x squared. And then negative 2 times 9 is negative 18. And then we need to make sure that it's in standard form. So the powers have to go down in order. So I'm going to need to rearrange this. So it's going to give us x cubed minus 2x squared plus 9x minus 18 for the final answer. All right, next one. So again, same ideas. So this one, since we have a radical, we are also assuming that negative square root of 5 is an answer. Okay. So again, starting in factored form, we would have x equals 0, x equals the square root of 5, and x equals the negative square root of 5. So this time, since there's not a number to move over, we're just going to have an x in front, and then we will have x minus the square root of 5, and then x plus the square root of 5. So again, I'm going to start by multiplying the radicals together, and then we will distribute that x in. So the x is just going to come down, and then we're going to have parentheses. So x times x is x squared. X times the square root of 5 is going to be x square root of 5. Negative square root of 5 times x is a negative x square root of 5. Negative square root of 5 times positive square root of 5 will be a negative square root, and then we're taking the radical, what's underneath the radicals times each other. So 5 times 5 is 25. And then again, before we distribute, we're going to combine like terms and simplify. So what's going to happen is these middle terms cancel out, and we know that the square root of 25 is 5. So right now we have x times, and then x squared minus 5. So now we distribute that x in. So x cubed minus 5x is going to be our final answer for this problem. All right, and the last one. So again, same ideas. So we are also assuming that 3 minus I is an answer to this. Okay. So we would have x equals 0, x equals 3 plus I, and x equals 3 minus I. So again, we're going to move everything to be on the same side as x. So since there's nothing to move on this one, we're just going to have an x by itself. And then here we need to subtract the 3 and then subtract the I. The second one we are subtracting the 3 and then we have to add the I. Okay. So again, I'm going to start with the last two and multiply those together. So I'm going to take x times all 3 of those, and then I'm going to take negative 3 times all 3, and then negative I times all 3. And then we're going to simplify that answer and distribute that x in. So for right now, the x just sits in front. So x times x is x squared. X times negative 3 is a negative 3x. X times I is a positive ix. And then we go to our next term and do the same thing. So negative 3 times x is negative 3x. Negative 3 times negative 3 is 9. Negative 3 times I is a negative 3i. And then we go to our last term and do the same thing. So negative I times x is negative ix. Negative I times negative 3 is positive 3i. And negative I times I is a negative I squared. Okay, so again, we want to simplify, so combine like terms. So there we'll have an x squared. And then negative 3x and a negative 3x will be negative 6x. So those cancel. And then we have a positive ix and a negative ix, so those just cancel out. And then we have negative 3i and positive 3i, so again, those cancel. And then we have to remember that I squared is really the same thing as negative 1. So this means negative 1 times a negative, so this will end up being a positive 1. So now we can combine that with our positive 9 to make 10, so positive 10. And then we distribute the x in. So x cubed minus 6x squared plus 10x is going to be our final answer for this problem. And it's also going to conclude this section.